So I just want to kind of show just some kind of common stroke flaws that we see quite a lot when we do swim video analysis sessions. So this is actually one of our athletes, and just kind of looking at some of the flaws that we've identified that this particular athlete can go away and actually work on to improve their swimming. So we start from above. First thing that kind of stands out is how much movement there is in the legs. So there's a lot of what we call going off balance. The legs are having to kind of scissor kick and kick out to keep him balanced in the water. And this is really a typical kind of position for someone like this who's come from actually a different background, a different sport, really strong physically and powerful. And it's usually where a lot of people get frustrated because they're physically strong, they can run fast, they can cycle fast, they can maybe swim fast for a length, but they can't swim fast for very long, and they just start to tire really quickly. So they're trying to use their strength in the water rather than use technique, and this generally only works for very short distances. And you usually find that you're out of breath after maybe a couple of lengths. So when we look at this, their hand entry is actually quite good. There's no real issues with that. This is where we start to see the kind of big flaws and things start to happen and what kind of work it. So when we look at this position here, this actual position is quite nice. Limit her a little bit so the swimmer is quite flat here. So what happens a lot of time when you swim flat is you start to rely a lot more on your shoulder flexibility. So if you're flexible and strong in the shoulders, you can potentially get away with less rotation. If you're like a lot of people now where you're not flexible in the shoulders and shoulders tend to be a bit more rounded because you work an office job, that can often be kind of a big issue. You start to load up those shoulders. This is what we see now here though, is this tendency to press down in the water. So you can see here how all that energy that they're using is they're just pressing straight down, and usually that comes from legs sinking, and it tends to be used as a way to help you lift your head out of the water. And there, as soon as that turns to breathe, and this is a kind of really something we see lots with swimmers, is the tendency to lift that head up to breathe. And this will cause a kind of chain of things to happen. Most notably, that left hand now presses down, and they kind of go off balance, and then they get themselves balanced again, and then the next breathing stroke it happens again. There, see, so what happens if you're pressing down in the water, all that's really doing is lifting you up rather than kind of pressing you forward in the water. So we really want to see a lot more of that pressing movement happen. When we go back, what we'll see is the legs kind of a bit more kind of all over the place, a bit sinking. Usually find with these kind of swimmers will swim faster with pool boys. Might be something you've noticed yourself that you're quite a bit faster with the pool boy. Usually that means there's something happened with the legs. And we can see here just how much those legs are kicking out, and that's just because he's off balance and kind of struggling to kind of keep balance in the water. And you can see there when he turns to breathe, he has to lift the head up, and then we lose that kind of stroke. And what we're looking for here is that he actually gets kind of on a non-breathing stroke where the elbow starts to bend and compress backwards. But because he's breathing kind of every third stroke here, it's like 2 strokes and then he's back into breathing again and he loses it. So it's just not that consistency. So we'd really like to see that ability to press here. What we're looking for is what we call a vertical forearm. It's a little bit easier to see as we come around the other side here, what we're looking for. In some ways actually the swimmer will benefit from just trying to slow everything down a little bit and work on the front part of the stroke, as well as reducing that tendency to lift the head. So what we speak about when we say high elbow, so you kind of get it here, but what always happens, and this is really common, is that you start to want to pull the elbow backwards. We're not actually being able to get the forearm engaged. And what happens in those cases, when you start to pull the elbows back, you rely more on the kind of upper neck muscles and the top of the shoulder, which is why a lot of swimmers get really tight and sore through the shoulder, rather than engaging the lats. And the lats are the kind of muscles, they're the swimming muscles that we want to be using. Where we'd like to see with this swimmer here is elbow being further forward, but their hand being directly underneath. And if we can keep that elbow nice and high in the water, we can then actually use that to generate power. And it's actually our forearm we're trying to use rather than just use our hand. So by getting that high elbow, and one of the key things to think about trying to get to this position is trying to keep your armpit open so that you actually generate that power, and the lats then can start to activate and generate the power rather than just pulling the elbow, because you start to what we call slipping. You start to slip in the water. So that's certainly one to do. So the first thing I would start with this kind of swimmer is just slowing it down, keeping relaxed in the water, and trying to work on the reduction of lifting the head to breathe, because that's going to help reduce the press down at the front of the strokes, as well as allow him to start bending that elbow more effectively to get more propulsion in, swim a lot faster. So hope you found that useful.